Hello and welcome, history fans, to my third video in the Viking series. Today we'll be talking about women and their role in Scandinavian society, and that is a complicated subject. Or at least, it's complicated to understand because there are many variables. In honor of Red Dead Redemption 2, which is the best fucking RPG that has been made in recent years, I would do the good, the bad, and the ugly for the topic, but I think I'll go the opposite route. Meaning I'll start with the ugly, and then the bad, and then the good. And I'm going to start with a story that was chronicled by a Muslim man and witness to a strange ritual that, I would like to add, the slave girl in question volunteered for without coercion. A little background. When a Viking dies, particularly a true Viking, as in a sea raider or warrior, he would be given a ship burial. I'll explain what those are soon, but on this day, a Muslim explorer and chronicler named Ahmad ibn Fadlan in the 10th century bore witness to a Swedish Rus ship burial in Eastern Europe on the Volga River, in or close to modern-day Russia. There was a lot of different parts of the ritual that were reported, such as intoxicating drinks, carrying the girl over a doorframe and such, but as the Muslim chronicler watched, the servant girl was sent around flanked by two other women. She went into each tent of the present warriors, and she had intercourse with every master of each tent. And then, when she went onto the ship burial, she was taken into a tent on the ship, and 6 men fornicated with her, and the men outside beat their shields with sticks so her screams were not heard. She was then strangled and placed on the boat with her master. Now, while I haven't found any evidence in primary sources for this next bit of information, a professor and scholar of Viking history that I trust reported that, well, when there is a Viking ship burial, which is where you get an old Viking ship, and I'll explain this now, an old Viking ship, or you make a smaller one that isn't seaworthy, and you place it on the ground, or in the ground, and put the Viking warrior, the deceased, and all of his belongings and loot in it. Now, if the Viking had been married to a commoner or a slave woman, or if he had a favorite mistress, it was apparently common, from what this scholar reported, for that woman to be taken to the ship burial. Now, this is a woman who would have had a life of riches and no real responsibilities. Not that it makes it right, but she would have lived a far better life than any of the men present. But when an earl or powerful Viking died, the Vikings would take her to the ship burial and strangle her, and then toss her body on the Viking ship because she technically belonged to that Viking. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, meaning what I had commented on a few videos ago, and the entire reason why I decided to make this video. And that was when I was on Tumblr and someone said that half of all Viking funerals were made for women warriors, which, as I said, and I'm quoting myself here, was the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. From my research and in reported archaeological findings, there have been 3 women in ship burials that we know of, other than the ones who get strangled. And only one of them was confirmed to be a warrior. And this woman was very large. I believe she was found to be 6'4", but that is very interesting though, because it means a few things. One, that women were not warriors in general because, well, she was the only one, and women never went out on campaign. But also, 2, that it wasn't technically a societal rule that could not be broken that a woman cannot be a warrior, because this woman was likely as strong as most of the men. But I will reiterate, when I say women were not warriors, it's important to note that women usually wouldn't want to be. Now, you might say I don't know that and that societal pressures simply kept them from speaking out, and to that I say I fucking do know that, and stop trying to make everything about today's politics. While it is true that we are all human, it's also true that different cultures and different customs and different religions make people turn out differently. They had different values than us and different gods than us. While our society today is more inclined towards freedom, their society was focused on survival and pleasing the gods. As men wished to please Odin, women wished to please Freyja or Frigg. And women were not meek or weak in Scandinavian society. Just because they were not warriors, and just because most of them did not want to be, did not mean that they were soft or someone that you could walk all over. In fact, based upon historical accounts and the sagas, women were encouraged to be headstrong. Only foreign women and slaves were expected to be obedient to Viking males. Viking females were the Midgard equivalent to the Valkyrie. Men were technically the head of the family, but women were the head of the household, and men followed their wives' instructions and edicts when they were home unless truly pushed. While a woman was not usually granted the title of Earl, and they were never real rulers, their counsels were listened to, and they were there to guide men in their endeavors and give them bravery if needed. An example of this: when the Scandinavian settlement in Vinland, which is North America, was attacked by natives, they were nearly overwhelmed and were losing the battle until one of the Viking wives stepped out into the middle of the melee and screamed at the men to show some backbone, shrieking like a Valkyrie out of the sagas. The natives were a bit wary of this strange livestock that the Scandinavians had brought, and that, coupled with this renewed surge of ferocity from the woman screaming, from the emboldened Scandinavian settlers, threw off the natives' attack and sent them running. In fact, women were also the main perpetrators of the famous Viking blood feuds more often than not, and while women were not usually warlords like an earl, they could be the head of a family. Un the Deep-Minded was a highly respected woman and leader of dozens of settlers, including 20 armed Viking warriors, and she was the leader of one of the first, if not the first, major settlement in Iceland. There are sagas written on her exploits and those that followed her. Something else to note, that a lot of noblemen, earls, and kings had many wives, but the wives of them could still demand respect. An example of this is Harald Finehair, the future king of Norway, at least at the time, actually conquered Norway because he wished to marry a noblewoman named Gyda, and the woman said, "No, go and make something of yourself if you wish to marry me. Conquer Norway and then we'll talk." And he swore to do it, and he would not cut his hair until the task was done. Eventually, from what we are told, his hair reached the floor, but he conquered it and married Gyda, making her his queen. Now, he had multiple wives, but she was his primary queen, and that was because she was strong-willed. Women could own property, they could divorce their husbands, and they could speak their minds. They could own anything a man could own. And some of them were trained to fight. They just, didn't go out and campaign. So they were not Viking warriors, contrary to that Tumblr post. But the thing is they really did not wish to be. And we know that because if they wished to be, they would have fucking said it. And sorry for all of the cursing in this video, but I know that this gender studies and things like that is a very controversial topic, and I'm just giving you the bare, unbiased facts of primary and secondary sources about Scandinavian women. Alright, if you want to learn anything else, I have 2 other videos out. The basics on the Vikings of the Viking Age and their background, and the other video which is about the Norse gods and the sagas. Next up, I'm going to be doing a video on the Viking way of war, and I hope you all enjoy that. There will be less cursing, and there will be less insisting upon a certain topic, but I had to make this known, and I just had to let people know that this, these women were not, or at least in Scandinavian society, Scandinavian women were not oppressed. Slave women were. This was a society with a lot of slaves. Or not a lot of slaves, but they were no stranger to, being slave owners. And I did speak about slavery in my basics video. But the women, if they wished to do something, then they would do it. However, that does not mean that they were all warriors, and half of all Viking ship burials were not women. There's only been 3. Alright, thank you so much, guys. Have a good day. Thank you.